about the CVILC, and kind of how we got here, the regulatory requirements, why we have to adhere to them in the first place. And then go into some of your membership requirements. As a member of CVILC, you do have some obligations, including reporting requirements. We'll go through your portal, so your online portal, which is where you enter in your survey data, so your management practices, your nitrogen applied, and your yield. Those are kind of the big three ones that you need to report on every year. And then as we're entering in now our second year of reporting on nitrogen applied and the harvested yield, we're also getting into timelines in the order about coefficients. So this is the, what do we do with the yield information? It's connecting it to a surrogate for approximating how much nitrogen is taken off with your crop yield. And then we'll circle back into some updates on the groundwater and surface water monitoring. Because it's the second year that we're doing the INP data entry, we are spending a little more time on a hypothetical situation to kind of demonstrate how you would enter certain situations into the system. So just be prepared. We'll go through that portal data entry at length today, but hopefully you'll find it helpful. All right, so what is CVILC and what does it do for you? So the Coachella Valley Irrigated Lands Coalition is a nonprofit organization. The goal of the coalition is to help you comply with the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. The order, your general order that you have now, allows for signing up with either an individual discharge permit or joining the coalition, and then the coalition reports for you. And the CVILC was founded with a board of directors, and which is made up of growers. We also have participants such as Coachella Valley Water District, which is one of the partners that does your monitoring for you, and then also the Riverside Farm Bureau. Okay, so here's your board of directors. If you didn't know, these are all the people that are sitting around monthly talking about how do we use your resources wisely and making sure you're in compliance. They contract with MLJ Environmental, which is the company that I work for, and Melissa works for, and Barry works for. So Alyssa is in charge of your membership, so she's the one you talk to if you need to update your parcel information, your acreage. All of that's very important to make sure you're updating annually with your invoicing. Like I said, we also have the participants of Coachella Valley Water District and Riverside Farm Bureau, who also, the CVW does the surface and groundwater monitoring for you. The reason you have an order is because it's under your Regional Water Quality Control Board that they've mandated that we have general order requirements to protect groundwater and surface water beneficial uses and to evaluate the impact of irrigated ag on that, those water quality. So the overall mission of all of the regional boards in California, and there's 9 of them, is to develop and enforce water quality objectives and implementation plans that will best protect the state's waters, recognizing local differences in climate, topography, geology, and hydrology. So you are in Region 7 at the very south. When we talk about the Central Valley, that's Region 5, which is that big one down the middle, and then Region 3, which is Central Coast. And so when we talk about the Irrigated Lands Program, much of our history starts with Central Valley and Central Coast, and some of that is now becoming what we say precedential, being brought down into Southern California, and actually the other regions too. You also have North Coast up in the north. You've got San Diego, you got LA and Ventura. So every region does have some version of the Irrigated Lands Program. The Irrigated Lands Program started in 2003. I think the first waivers were 2004, but in 2003 was where the regional boards, the state board said to the regional boards, you need to have an Irrigated Lands Program. We need to start regulating agriculture. Before that, there was no requirement to monitor surface water or groundwater or anything about what was coming off of agricultural fields. So this is all also in compliance with federal laws as well, right? EPA Clean Water Act. We have a Porter Cologne Act in California. So it was just that ag was a little later than other things like cities and POTWs, or even cities, which have to comply with water quality regulations. In 2014 is where the Colorado River Regional Water Board adopted the first conditional waiver. And so, and back in the Central Valley and Central Coast, they had adopted theirs in 2004. a waiver only lasts 5 years. So every 5 years, the regional board would have to re-up and redo their whole waiver. It's not ideal. It's kind of buying time until they can have actual orders in place, which is what we have now. And in 2020, that's where there was a general order for Imperial that that came up. That was, well, in 2020 is where the regional board started to implement the requirements that came up with East San Joaquin, which was the first general order after the waiver. So we moved from waivers to general orders. East San Joaquin was the first coalition in the Central Valley. And with that came some new reporting requirements, including evaluating groundwater that was not in the program before, and then reporting on nitrogen applied. And then eventually the yield came along afterwards. And so that brought us up into 2022, which is where MLJ became involved with the coalition, and it moved a little outside of CVWD, who was doing all of this monitoring previously, into kind of a separate entity because there was more requirements than just monitoring surface and groundwater, right? With all these management practice information and reporting, the coalition brought us in to help summarize that information. And then in 2023, that crop year is the first year that you had to turn in your INMP summary report. So that was due last January. And then now, this upcoming January, February, you'll be turning in for the 2024 crop year. Okay. This is the order. There's a nice QR code. If you want to download it, you should know it. It actually is one of your requirements that you should have this on farm. We don't expect you to necessarily, but this meeting should give you enough understanding of the most important parts of this order, but it is available, it is online, it's a good thing to know and to have. It does include all of these requirements that we're talking about today. All right, so what else as a member do you need to do? Well, you need to do a notice of confirmation. This was early on when the coalition became the third party under this new order. It was basically anyone that was under the old waiver, a notice of confirmation that, yes, you are in this new order, you are with the third party. They are the ones that are reporting for you. So if you don't have one on file, you want to make sure that is updated, which I think we can do through the portal. Okay.
We'll let you know if you don't have one.
And in case that didn't come through online, Alyssa reminded me that we keep track if you have one on file. So every year when we invoice, we will give you a nice little reminder and send you a new one to please return to us. You also have to pay your dues. There's a per acre fee that the coalition charges. It also covers your state board fee. The coalition gets billed by the state for all of the enrolled acreage, but on a per acre basis. And then also they have an additional cost to pay our time and to make sure all of your reporting is in compliance. And then annually, this is the big one we'll spend some time today about, is the farm plan and the INMP summary report. So that's reporting on the year before. And then looking ahead, your INMP worksheet, so that's for now would be planning for 2025 crop year, that needs to stay on farm. So that is a requirement that is supposed to be on farm, completed by March 1st of each year. So that's one. Keep in mind, it does not go to the coalition. We don't track it, but if regional board ever came to your property or your site, they would ask to see a copy of it. And then attend an annual meeting, which you are doing now. So good job. What does the CVILC membership do for me? So the reason the CVILC is here is to help you with compliance. We've talked about that a little bit. And then in addition, let me, real quick. Hard to do. All right, we might just ignore that on the screen. Okay, it's just going to be there for a while. Okay, the coalition also takes care of the surface and groundwater monitoring so that you don't have to monitor what is coming off your field. That would be very expensive. It wouldn't be great to have to do that, right? Because you want to farm, you don't want to be a water quality consultant. So the coalition takes care of that for you. We also, as a coalition, help to develop any sort of water quality restoration plan, which takes care of if there's a water quality issue. So if there's the pesticides are detected and above a threshold in your surface water or in groundwater, if we have nitrate that's detected above the threshold, that's when we need to start developing a plan for what growers can do and the time frame to implement new management practices to to kind of mitigate for that concern. Do have the requirement to pay the state water board fees. So that's the growers required, but you pass it on to the coalition. The coalition takes care of that for you. We're also here to assist with reporting compliance. Here to help if you get stuck. Alyssa almost always is available for you to call. Barry also can help. We have multiple staff that can help you. Alex has been used quite a bit to also help with having growers enter in their INMPs or their farm plans or membership questions. So the board is there to help and assist you and make it as easy as possible. And then our other thing is that we go into the regional board office for you. We speak on your behalf. We talk with them about your what's realistic with resources, what makes sense. We try to bring a lot of science into the dialogue about does the requirement make sense for what we need to do. And we try to negotiate too. We have the same goal to protect water quality, but let's make sure we're doing things as pragmatically as possible. Now, that doesn't mean we always get what we want. So obviously, there are things in the order that we may not all love, but while we're keeping you in compliance, we're also continuing to have those conversations. The value of your membership, coming up here, cost-effective solutions. You've got a board of growers who talk to us consistently about what we are doing on your behalf of reporting and compliance, and they're working with us to continue to engage in the most effective solutions. We also have been able to keep anonymous reporting. So instead of you having to report as Farmer John, this is my field and this is my nitrogen applied, and now it's there for the public to see that that's exactly tied to me and my piece of land, we get to report it anonymously by both member ID, it's an anonymous number, and by parcel ID, that is also anonymous. So that was a big win, because if you're in Central Coast, you don't get that. That's not something that they've carried through with their regional board. They report directly to the regional board. And then cost savings, right? So instead of you having to pay to do your water quality monitoring and pay the analytical lab and do your data management and then report, whether it's your farm manager or you hire someone, right? You now kind of share that collective cost. We have a representative monitoring system, so you don't have to do edge of field monitoring, and we do one annual report for everybody, right? So as opposed to having 100 different reports from Coachella members, the regional board gets one. And in case, I'm assuming you all are members, and that's why you're here, but in case you have a neighbor who's not in the coalition and they're not sure if they should be, this is a little visual that the coalition has developed. It's based off the requirements of the regional board, and essentially what it means is it does not matter how big or small your property is, and if you irrigate and if you have commercial ag, you need to be in the coalition. It does not matter if you think you do not discharge to surface water or groundwater, you still need to be in the coalition. This is the coalition boundary, and currently we're at 79 members, and we cover about 38,000 irrigated acres. Your dues are $8.50 an acre, and like I said before, it covers your state board fee, so that is built into it, your membership, and then your groundwater and surface water reporting and monitoring. All right, so that's what the coalition is, why we exist, what we do for you, what you need to do to be a good member of good standing. Now this is your member portal to try to make all of your reporting requirements easier. We have done a few updates this year, so I'll walk through those. And I see Barry's taking, just as a reminder for people joining online, Barry's going to reach out to you to make sure you put your member ID in the chat. Okay. So this is your landing page when you log into the Coachella portal. There's a link to this also on the Coachella website. So there's the URL at the bottom as well. And once you log in, I should have noted too, maybe I'll go back a second, is that you need your member ID, your email, and your password. If you forget your password, do not worry. There's a forget password here that you can click on that anytime. You don't need to contact someone. You don't need to email them. You don't need to call them. You just click there, reset your password. You're on your merry way. We want to make sure you can access this at any time, any day or night, any time of the week, right? We understand you're busy, you're farming. That's what you should be doing. We're trying to make this as limited amount of time as possible. As I go through too, there's times that you can stop and you can save. So if you don't have time to finish it, don't worry. You can save, you can come back, it'll save your progress. Okay. So when you log in, this is going to be your landing page or dashboard. We'll use that term a little bit of dashboard and modules or tiles on here. So on your dashboard, you can always come back to it at any point when you're working through the survey data entry. The navigation bar is always going to be on your left, and you'll be able to kind of find your navigation from there. And then you'll see these 4 tiles here, and you've got your membership information where you can you view your balance and your invoice. You can update your contact information if your email changed or your phone number changed. You can also, to the right of that, you'll be able to see the member video. It'll be posted once after today. So if you also have a neighbor who didn't come to an annual meeting, you can tell them to come check it out. And then we'll make sure that they get recorded for their annual reporting or their annual meeting compliance. To that, in the bottom corner to the left is where you would click to click your farm plan and INMP summary report, and then over to the right is the INMP worksheet. So if you click there on that INMP worksheet button, that's where you can download a PDF. You can either save it on your desktop and fill it in on the PDF, or print it and fill it out on hard copy. But you do need to have that copy on farm by March 1st of every year. Back to the navigation bar, over to the left, there are some FAQs, frequently asked questions, about the farm plan, the INMP summary report, and the worksheet. And then there's also this, if you need to change your password, you can do that here. Okay, I think this is a duplicate, so we're going to move past this one. This is a visual over in the corner of your worksheet, so this should look familiar to you. Just want to kind of make sure you know that does not get turned into us, that stays on farm. Okay, so we're going to enter into the portal with a hypothetical. This is just a reminder, there's technically 2 surveys in the order, a farm plan and an INMP summary report. We've built them to kind of go seamlessly together. So you start with your INMP summary report, because that's really important that when you are reporting, you can report holistically if you have the same crop, the same acreage, parcel, and management practices and nitrogen applied, but we set it up that way, and I'll spend a little time talking about it, to go forward into your farm plan so it stays consistent with your reporting. Before you start, you'll want to make sure that, because it's going to start with your INMP summary report, that you do have your amount of nitrogen applied per acre for each crop and field that you have enrolled in the coalition. You'll want to have, if you to know the concentration of nitrogen in your irrigation water. That is one of the nitrogen sources. So when you're planning, you should kind of have an idea of what your nitrogen is in your irrigation water. If it's 0, that's fine. You can put that in. And then also your management practices. So both your nitrogen and your irrigation practices. And then, so that's kind of your practices for irrigation and nitrogen. Also with your farm plan is all of your sediment erosion, wells. So you want to kind of make sure you have all of that familiar. You should. And then your yield is your other one. You want to have all of your total harvested yield ready to go be inputted into the system. When you enter into the system, you're going to have these little tours, which you can end at any time. The idea with the tours is it gives a little explanation of some of the features on the page. And so again, that's what it'll pop up here. You can end it or you can watch it by clicking next. And then we start with our step 1. And let me go back 1 second here. So those numbers there, it's a little covered by that drop down, but it says 1, 2, and 3. Those are your 3 main steps. There's more mini steps within them, but it's kind of 3 main areas that you're going to start with your enrolled parcels, and then you're going to check your information, and then we're going to add information to your management unit from that place. And so this page here as a whole is going to give you information about what a management unit is, and is where you're going to start checking and this part down at the bottom is what we're going to zoom into. This is where you look and you make sure that you've got the right information here. So it's going to be pre-populated with your enrolled parcels. So you'll see here APN, and this is 111 and 222. The TRS is filled in for you. That's Township Range Section. We do that part for you, but really you want to make sure that your parcel is correct, your crop is correct, your acreage is there, and then we'll get through the rest. But you can edit, delete, or duplicate as needed to update your information here. All right, so what we're going to do this year is use a hypothetical situation. Don't, if you notice that it says carrots and it looks like it might be a permanent tree crop, I know, I understand, it's hypothetical. But it's the idea is I want to walk you through how farming doesn't always adhere to a parcel, right? And how do we deal with that in a database system? And this is really important because we want to make sure we're reporting on your behalf kind of accurate information, what represents what's happening in the field. Okay, so in my hypothetical situation, I am a carrot grower, a corn grower, and I also grow broccoli and lettuce on a rotating crop field. I have 3 parcels enrolled in the coalition. And my first parcel, I'll just call it, it ends in 111. It's 40 acres, and that's one here on the left. And it's just carrots, nice and simple, 40 acres to grow carrots, simple. Covers the whole parcel. My second parcel, which ends in 222, I have half carrots and half corn. So I essentially don't have all 46 acres. That's what's enrolled for my parcel, but that's not what I have for each crop. And then my bottom one ends with 333. I've got a rotating of broccoli in the fall and lettuce in the spring that it covers all 50 acres, but only half of the year. Okay, so this is another way to look at it. So me, as a hypothetical farmer, I think of it as blocks. I think of block A, my carrots. I manage them all the same. They have the same drip irrigation system. I harvest them the same. I apply the same amount of nitrogen, and my yield is factored. I do my whole yield estimate with that block A together. And then block B, right, on the same parcel as my carrots is only half of that acres, and then you see the block C down below. Okay, so we're kind of going to use this hypothetical as we move through so you can see how you would enter your information if this applies to you at all. So in this situation, where I come in, I have pre-population from last year. And last year, I didn't have 3 parcels. I only had 2. So one, I need to make sure I add my new parcel, ends in 333. And also, my parcel that is, what is this, is 222 is now half corn and half carrots, right? So that's where we add the records below. So in this case where we have carrots, you can see I've added. So what I can do is I can duplicate and I can add another row, and I update the APN to say 222. And then I indicate that it's carrots, and then I put also my acreage in there. And then for the block B, that one stays essentially the same. And then block C, this one's the important one. That's that rotating crop that we have an extra field in here to make sure that it is marked of, am I not seeing it? Let me see if it's next slide. Oh, okay. There should be a place, oh, it's over, sorry, it's over to the right. I've been talking to Imperial the last 2 days, since theirs is on the left. But the crop rotation is over to the right. So that click there indicates that these 2 parcels in block C are rotating crops. And we keep track of that on our end to know that it's the same piece of land, but it's not for the full year. It's still within the last 12 months of reporting though. Okay, so now we're gonna move forward. Now I've got block A, block B, and I've got block C, but block C is actually 2 different management units because I have 2 different crops. Okay, so that means I have 4 management units that I'm gonna report on. And then this is another way to look at it. So when you say hit the preview management units, it's going to show it across the top. And you'll see the 2 parcels with block A for my carrots. You'll see 1 parcel with my corn. And then you'll see the same parcel between my 2. Let's see if this will work. Nope, work. Okay, bear with me 1 second. I'm trying to use a pointer, and that didn't work very well. Okay. So you can see up here, we've got the lettuce and then the broccoli. So now that's, again, my 4 management units. So this concept is noted in here on your or on your entry form to help, might be a little unfamiliar. So we've got some steps in here. We also have a fun little 3-minute informational video that you can watch kind of what that means. It's kind of a similar what I'm walking through now, but it's to try to make sure you understand what management unit means because it's used throughout. That's shorthanded as MU. And the intent of it is to make it easier. So if you do have a membership that has 100 parcels, but you manage them very much the same, you can aggregate them together. So once you have this set up, if 50 of those parcels are managed the exact same with the same crop, you only have to enter that information in once, and we associate with the 50 different parcels on the back end. So hopefully it makes your life a little easier. And again, this is just another way to look at this situation where we've got block A, we've got block B, and we've got our block C. And again, block C is 2 management units. All right. And then this is another way. Barry, I'm going to ask you if you could just mute everyone on the phone. Getting a little bit of noise in the background. Thank you. So here you can see again, just really hammering this home, but the different way you can see this is these two here are covered, these two records are covered under that management unit, the blue under there, and then these two here, which are 2 separate management units. Okay, great. Now you feel confident, you understand management units, it's all in here, you double check, you're ready to hit next question. All right, now we're going to enter into the entry for the nitrogen applied and your yield information. So we're going to have this part before we get into your management practice information. A couple of things once you hit this stage, you can see up here in the left-hand corner it says back. So if you need to go back and edit anything, you can. Once you go forward from here, your management units are set. So if there is a way to reset your survey, but that means you'll lose your work from this point forward. So definitely recommend you got your management units all good, you've double checked them, now you can move forward. At this point forward, again, if you make a mistake, you can come back and edit it, and I'll show you at the end, you can also do that, even if you've gotten all the way to the end. If you need to adjust an application or something with your harvested yield, you can do that later. And I'll say up to a certain point. At a certain point, we have to report for you. So at a certain point, we will say no more edits, and we'll lock it and won't let you edit. Other things in here, so there's that survey completeness at the top right here. When we move through, it says 0 of 16. As we move through, it'll start to fill in. So again, a little cue of how far you are in this whole process. This is taking us a lot longer because I'm talking a lot, but this should have taken you maybe 2 minutes, right, to check your management units and move forward to this question. But you'll start seeing that progress as you move through. And then other controls, if you forget to enter something, you'll have a pop-up if it's required. It'll let you know, like, oh, don't forget, you can't move forward unless this is filled in. So that's a little of our quality control in there. All right, so we're ready. I've got my carrots, my corn, my lettuce, my broccoli. I'm ready to enter my information. I'm going to start with the nitrogen in the irrigation water. One of the new features that's been added in is a nitrogen calculator. So you can actually do this. This one goes straight into the system, right? This one, okay. So with Kachala, we have it that if you click on the calculator icon, now you don't have to. You can just enter in if you know your concentration or you know it's 0, but you can also click the calculator and it'll calculate it for you. And so in this case, okay, let me go back a minute. Okay, so you enter in step 2, your concentration of your nitrogen in your irrigation water. You can take a sample of your water, you can send it to a laboratory. That also is noted on here, if you are using CVWD, you can use parts per million or milligrams per liter of 1.15. So that's the default here. It's a little small, but it does say that there. So what you would do is you leave 1.15, or if you have your concentration, you would update it here, and then it will, okay. And then from here, you need to put in your acre feet. So there's an option of doing an irrigation, how much water you've applied by acre inches or acre feet. Here we've put in 4 acre feet, and then it's calculated the 2.85. That's the concentration in the water that's been applied onto the field. And then once you click the button here, update in irrigation water, it will update onto your form here. Okay. And again, if you know that your concentration is 0, you can just type in 0 here. The next thing to account for are your organic amendments. In this case, I've applied some organic amendments. The definition of this, this includes like manure or compost or bone meal. So something that it's not a manufactured fertilizer where you have a known nitrogen content. It does take some understanding of where your source of your like manure is coming from and other factors like temperature. There are resources available. I think we might have some on the website, but we're working. We're working on getting some more updates and links available to help with that. But your CCA should have a pretty good understanding too. The intent is to make sure you're putting not how much manure you're putting on, but how much nitrogen you're expecting that to be available for your crop. So in our example here, I'm using bone meal. So the nitrogen content of bone meal is 8%. On my carrots, I've applied 50,000 pounds to my 50 acres. And then so what I do is I multiply that 0.08, so 8%, by that 50,000, and then I divide it by my acres to get the pounds per acre. So in this case, I've got 80 pounds per acre of nitrogen applied with organic amendments. And then next is your dry and liquid fertilizers. This is also one that it's important to know if you're using dry or liquid. If you are using liquid, you'll need to take into account the density of the weight of the liquid fertilizer. But essentially, what we want to do is make sure we know how much nitrogen is applied, not how much product is applied. And here we've got an example of using 11-52-0. So I've got 11% of nitrogen within my fertilizer that I'm applying. I've applied around 64,000 pounds over my 50 acres. And so I multiply that by 11% or 0.11, and then I divide it by my 50. So that comes out to be 140.5 pounds of nitrogen per acre that I've applied, right? So this is on top of my amendments. It's on top of what I have in my irrigation water. And then the last one is a foliar fertilizer. I'm not applying any on carrots, so in this case it's just 0. But if you did apply foliar fertilizer, it's going to be a very similar calculation like you would do with the dry fertilizers as well, right? Where you want to know that the amount of nitrogen, not the amount of product. Okay. And so now that we have that all in, we can record the yield. So in my case, I've got 60,500 pounds of carrots per acre. So again, everything we talk about is per acre, not total field, but per acre. And in this case, my reporting unit is pounds. And then when I go, so I move over to my right, filling in the cells. My yield information, I've got none. Great, my yield was terrific. It's what I expected. I have no notes for the coalition to know. When you should pay attention to this is a lot of times where we see permanent crops, like a young orchard where it's non-bearing, we want to make sure we know that. If you are doing a permanent crop, there's also a crop age that's associated with the crop type. But we do want to make sure we know if it's a non-bearing for whatever reason associated with your crop. There's some other ones in here too if you didn't apply nitrogen. So you could put zeros across, but we still are asking you to say no nitrogen. We just know that it's not a typo or an error. And then, or if it's not irrigated, or if it's seed or rootstock, that's another thing that we want to note in here, that when we talk about coefficients, seed coefficients are going to be a little different. Your yield's going to be a little different. So we want to make sure that that's documented here. And then the other thing is additional comments, which is our last item here. And this is where you can make any note if there's something unexpected that happened or anything you want to say, hopefully nice, but hopefully also applying to your yield. And there could be things like pest pressures or environmental pressures like climate, temperature, frost that could impact your yield, right? So you had all these great plans, you're applying your nitrogen, you're watching your crop grow, something happens, you don't have the yield you expect. That's exactly when you need to put something in here. So we have an idea that your yield is probably not what you expect for the amount of nitrogen you applied. Okay. The other thing, so in the case of the carrots, I reported in pounds per acre, but my broccoli, I report in cartons. That's what makes sense to me. I have 20 pound cartons, and so that's what I select on this drop down. There is a lot of options here. I know it might be hard to see in the room, but what we've tried to do is give you as many options that make sense. It's how you get it, your yield reported to you, but make sure you are looking at that pound. So if you know it's in cartons, make sure you select, in my case, the 20 pounds and not the 30 pounds, because what we do is we move that into a pound metric, right? So it's going to be really important that you select the right unit for what you're reporting on. And also, don't forget this is per acre. I'm going to keep repeating that. All of this is per acre, the amount applied of nitrogen per acre and your yield per acre. Okay, and then, all right, so then this is all filled out now for my 4 management units, my carrot, my corn, my lettuce, and my broccoli. I'm going to go to my next question here. And now we get into the area of management practices. It looks a little different. So instead of having those management units on the left, we're going to have them across the top. So you can see my block A, my block B, and then 2 block C's, right? Because I've got my broccoli and my lettuce there. At the very top, there is this, this preview management units. Oh, we'll show you in a second. But you can always look and remind yourself, too, of what crop is in there. I wanted to point out that there's this check all button. So in my case with block B, which is my corn, if I did all of these practices, I could click check all, and it would just highlight them all for me, make it a little easier. There's also another way to do it down here, where if I check all of everything I do is drip irrigation, I can select it here. Doesn't matter how many management units you have. And then again, a reminder, so finally we're seeing that bar come across. We're at 5 of 16 baby steps. So we're moving along, we're getting into our management practice area. There's also this preview management units, which is here. And then again, if you needed to look at this, you can always remind yourself. You might have a lot that you're reporting, you might have left and come back, and you just need a little reminder of what you're reporting on. And then, okay, oh, and our last reminder is there is a reset survey button. So if you needed to, like you messed something up, like you just want a clean slate, you can do that. You can kind of pull the cord on all of this, reset your survey. Be careful if you hit that, but it is there as an option. Okay. So as we move forward, there's going to be a series of questions. I'm not going to go through each of them because they look pretty much the same. They're going to have practices to the left. You're going to have your management units across the top. You're going to have those check all options. You're going to be asked, what is your irrigation method, your primary irrigation method, your secondary irrigation method? What are your efficiency practices for nitrogen applications and for irrigation practices? So this is all part of your INMP summary report. And these questions actually apply to both reports. So when we report it to the regional board, we're saying by marking this once, you're complying for both reports. And this last little bit is to enter in who you are, who completed the forms. It serves as a signature. So if there's ever any question, we know who to go back to, or if you have a farming operation that has a lot of people that might be coming in and filling this out, you also keep track of who filled it out for you that year. And then you can finish here and be like, oh, that was a lot for one day. I'm going to come back and do my farm plan later, or you can move forward. Again, it's always going to save as you move along through this. And okay, we talked about this one. So you'll see here that your INMP summary report is complete and your farm plan is incomplete at this point. So we're going to continue with our survey. Okay. And then one of the first things you're going to be asked about your farming operation, so your parcels that are enrolled in the coalition, is do you have any irrigation wells, yes or no? Do you have any abandoned wells, yes or no? And then how many domestic wells, which is drinking water wells, do you have on your enrolled property? So not that you own, but enrolled in the coalition, which, right, is irrigated and commercial. All right, and then from there we go into some more management practices about what practices you use for sediment erosion control, both irrigation practices and cultural practices. So those practices are listed, and again, you'll see your management units across the top. These are the same management units you reported your INMP summary report data for. After this, we go into a very broad question, which is to record the typical chemicals that you apply to your property. It is an open-ended question. It is a text box. You can fill this in any which way you want to, but you do need to fill something in. So you'll see the management units down on the left, and then just mark in the commonly applied products that you put on your fields, applying to those management units still. And then this last couple bit is where we get into spray management. Another important part about practices is mitigating for spray drift. So we've got what are your management practices, and then how often is your equipment calibrated, and drainage and runoff. And so this is where you'll be describing your subsurface drainage system, and then if you have any runoff from your property. So that again is in here. It is what we've done is we've there's 2 questions. That's why. Okay. So this one is describe your subsurface drainage area. So This is an open text box for you to add in kind of a description. And then this next one is the runoff question. And this is where we've pretty much marked this. Well, you have two options. So you either are draining into the Coachella Valley Stormwater Channel eventually, or you have no discharge from your property. So you'll pick one. Okay. And again, almost done. You just need to mark who filled this out, and it serves as a signature. It's an electronic date for you, and then we are all done. You can see both of these are complete. There's a return to edit button here that you can come back to almost any time up until we start reporting, and then this will be locked and you won't be able to. And then there's also a way to print for your own records. And then last is you can reset to have a clean slate if for some reason you felt you needed to. Okay, so that is the member portal. Those are all of your questions that you'll be asked as you enter your INMP summary report and your farm plan information. There is this is back to your dashboard page. We wanted to point out that there's more resources available, which some links. There's also on the CVILC website, there's links to additional resources and information to help you fill this out. And I think they're continuing to work on that, including we're exploring with more organic amendments, some resources, as well as with conversions for fertilizers, commonly used fertilizers. So a little less calculation, hopefully, and some tools to help. Okay. Reminder about that worksheet. Keep it on farm. Don't turn it into IVILC or to CVILC. And it is due by March 1st every year. And that was just a reminder of where you can find that to print it out or save a copy. It's a PDF, a template. It has instructions, and there's also an example within it. So you should be familiar. Again, more FAQs, reminder of where you find those. And all right, timelines. So your member portal is live now, right, Alyssa? So feel free to log in after today. So we are live. What we do need is a little bit of time every year. This is why it goes down for about, 3 or 4 weeks, because we have to migrate your old data, pre-populate your new data, and then you're all ready for the 2024 crop year. So we always do that around October, and then it's live early November around your grower meeting timeline. The February 1st is your deadline to get your INMP summary report and your farm plan turned in. There will be some friendly reminders that come along, but eventually, if you are late, the CVILC is going to charge a late fee. It does cost money to keep reminding you and to harangue you about turning it in. So they're going to recoup that cost with a late fee. So keep that date, put it in your calendar, make sure you get it turned in. You can, from now through February 1st, you can go submit your information. Reminder about the March 1st deadline, that needs to be your INP worksheet. And this is all leading up to, we report on the 2024 data July of each year. So the previous year's information, we use that time between February and July to aggregate the information, make sure it all looks good. There might be some follow-up the coalition does just to make sure, I mentioned it's easy to report the amount of product applied and forget that you need to do the calculation for the nitrogen, or an easy typo, you forgot a zero at the end. I mean, there's lots of things that may make your data look a little unusual. There might be a follow-up call just to confirm that things look correct. Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay, because Alyssa was over to the side saying about the timing for the portal. The portal is live now. The email should have been sent out last night. It might be in your inbox from this morning, but you can go ahead and go to the CVILC website, click on that portal page, and be able to log in now. Okay. All right. Late fees, that's the reminder. Yeah. All right, so with this reporting that I was talking about in July, we're going to, we have to start reporting the yield relative to the nitrogen removed. And this is where we get into coefficients. It's something that's been incorporated into the Central Valley for a few years now. They've had a lot more time than you guys have to develop coefficients, work with CDFA, work with cooperative extension, to do some research and studies and get a better understanding of the crop removal. but you do have this requirement in your order. So the idea of the coefficients is to compare nitrogen applied to yield information, which gives an indicator of relative efficiency, and we need a way to express that yield in nitrogen removed, and that's what the coefficient does. Okay, so to kind of put this into a more visual aspect, and I did not create this, I stole it. The reference is at the bottom. I promise it's not mine. I want to give accolades to whoever created this, but the nitrogen inputs on your left, right? That's what you're thinking of. You know you need to grow a crop. You need to have a certain amount of yield. This is your whole plan. This is your business. So you know what you're applying, right? And we've talked about how you record that into the system. So you're applying it, and you're probably thinking somewhere along the way whether that you're going to lose some of that nitrogen. It's not all just going to go into crop growth. There's nitrogen gas loss, there's the runoff with surface or groundwater, there's leaching, there's mobilization, it can get bound into the soil, right? So you're applying more than your plant needs because you know these things happen. And we understand that, and we make sure that message is very clear to regional board. It is not a one-to-one relationship. It will never be a one-to-one relationship. What we are trying to do right now, without messing around with the blue things, is kind of how can we estimate the nitrogen removed, knowing what the crop is uptaking and utilizing and then is being harvested. So we're using these coefficients to try to capture as best as possible what we know is being used by the plant. And kind of at this point, ignoring that other part. It's important, and it will be brought into the conversation at a point. But right now, it's just trying to create these nitrogen applied to removed ratios that give an idea of kind of compared to other growers doing the same things, are the ratios about the same? That's usually where the conversation is going to start. And in the Central Valley, again, they're ahead of you. That's where their conversation started. They've moved down into a whole different world about groundwater and what that means for leaching. But at the moment, you guys don't have quite those steps in your order. Good? Okay. Okay. So with our nitrogen removed coefficients, we use those to convert the harvested material to pounds of nitrogen removed. So we take your yield, we multiply it by this coefficient. Now we get a removed value. We estimate, this is again a kind of a general estimate of how much nitrogen is needed to efficiently grow a crop. And we use these coefficients, we get them from literature and studies, ideally from this area. So we have an example of carrots here. So this is with Dr. Ali Montazar's research, where the nitrogen removed coefficient is 0.0015. And so if I had 30 pounds of carrots that I grew, I would multiply that by the coefficient of 0.0015. And again, we do this on the back end. You don't need to worry about it. We just need your yield to be properly reported. And then that would mean that there is 45 pounds of nitrogen removed with harvest. There's some resources that are really good on the FREP website. And with this conversation about carrots, and it's why we have this in here as an example, is, like I mentioned, Central Valley has been doing this a little bit longer. They've had more funding put into crops in the Central Valley. But when your order was created, there was a strict deadline that we were supposed to have, and actually I think I have it on here, by March 1st, 2024, we were supposed to have 95% of the coalition's acreage with a coefficient. That was in your order. And then the following year, next year, was supposed to be 99% of your acreage. We started engaging regional board in conversation about you can't just use coefficients that are done in the Central Valley or even a Mediterranean climate. Those aren't necessarily the same. Carrots was a very good example that we had that information available that we could say, here's an example. So we were able to write a tech memo explaining all of this, submitted it March 1st, right, because that's an order requirement deadline. So we submitted it, and we got approval to extend your timeline for 5 years. So the new timeline is by March 1st, 2029, to have 95% of the acreage with crop coefficients, and by 2030, 99%. So what we did is we explained the situation to regional board, we talked them through it, and they said, great, but we also promised to do some work, right? They didn't just say, great, we're not going to bother you for 5 years and tell us how you did. They want to know that we're making progress towards this. So we did a literature review. It was pretty superficial, high level, right? We wanted to make sure we're not using too many resources going down rabbit holes. We want to stay pulling in relevant information. So we did that this spring. You shared the cost with Imperial, which was kind of nice. A lot of your crops overlap. So we were able to kind of share costs between the two coalitions and then submit a tech memo that summarized the literature that we found for crops in both Coachella and Imperial region, summarize it for the coefficients that we could find. So we either said for crops there was none, couldn't find any, and what's not an all exhaustive, but from our research, and we reference what we looked up, none or poor, like maybe there's a coefficient, but it doesn't suit this climate. A reasonable, maybe it's Mediterranean climates, so it's similar, but I don't know, are good. It was a coefficient developed in this region. We're feeling pretty good. And it was also, the study was done in a way that makes sense for what we're using it for. There's a lot of nitrogen efficiency studies done out there, but not maybe necessarily that fit exactly for what we're looking for to capture all of that nitrogen removed to have a coefficient. So we did that. We submitted that in July 1st, 2024. They found that there's 3 coefficients. Only one really applies to Coachella, but carrot, Sudan grass, and Rhodes grass. And then recently, so this is Montezar's list of crops that he has studies for. And we have the carrot and the Sudan grass in here. Oh, because you guys don't have any. So carrot, which is completed for Coachella. And then there's one in progress, but then the remaining ones, these are all recently funded that will start in 2025. Now that we have this information, which we didn't know for sure in July, when all of this is completed, you'll be at 66% of your crop acreage. So this will cover a huge amount, but we move into crops that have less than 2% of your acreage. So we're going to have, I think, more conversations with the regional board of the cost it is to do these field studies, what are available resources. This is being funded by CDFA FREP grants, so that's great, but there's still limited resources to do this work. And so we'll need to be talking if it's realistic to get that 99 or 95 and 99% done by 2025 and kind of what that looks like for 2029 and what kind of a plan, an alternative plan could be. And then I think this is slide, Barry put this one in for me. So right now with Montezar's research, he is looking for some participants to help with his studies. So if you grow cauliflower, bell peppers, citrus, or onions, fresh or processing, I think, trying to think, is there a, oh, okay. Maybe reach out to Alex and we can make sure that we've got your information and we can pass it on to Montezar. And also, if you've already talked to Alex, he's already passed on your information. So don't worry if you already have. But are looking for growers who are willing to participate. Question? Okay. Let me repeat that really quick. So actually, I'll hand it to you. There you go. You can say it again.
If you are interested in participating, you can just send your contact information to the CVILC email address or give us a call on the CVILC phone number. All that information, it's on your invoice, it's on the website, it's on the portal. Pretty easy to find our contact information. There was a question about...
Okay. So I've been using the term crop year, right? So reporting on the 2024 crop year. And obviously crops generally are not grown January through December. They're grown at all different times of the year. The main thing is that you are reporting 12 months. So if you grow from March to February and that's your reporting cycle, then report that to us at the end of the year. And also stay consistent, right? So if you're doing July through June, that's fine. Then report to us on that 12-month cycle because we're going to do this every year. So it doesn't really necessarily matter as long as you're consistent in what you're reporting on. And then make sure it's everything in those 12 months, all of your harvest, all of your application, all of your crops. So if you have rotating crops, right? So the main thing is just to try to stay consistent from year to year and that we're capturing the 12 months. Okay. Okay, so there's some questions online about nurseries. There are no coefficients for nurseries necessarily. There are coefficients for different plants, but the amount of diversity that nurseries has. In addition, you're not taking something necessarily from the ground. Either if you are, it's because you're taking a whole tree from the ground and you're selling it, or you're taking a pot and you're selling it. So it's a very different situation. To date, we have not been pushed to have to do something other than estimate the yield. And what we are asking for growers who have nurseries is to say, I sold 50 pots of something, right? Okay, double checking that that's how we have it in the system. So you can't not report anything if you have a nursery, but we are asking you to report something. So just how many containers, how many plants you've sold, and then I think we have 4 different ways to record nurseries. One is nurseries potted, one is nurseries in ground, maybe. Yeah, but there's about 4. Yeah, so you should, and if you're stuck, you do have a nursery and you have more questions, give us a call and we can help walk you through it. I should know, I just gave a presentation at the nurseries conference, so I should remember this better than I do. But at that conference, I will say too, there was a lot of conversations from all of the regions, especially Central Coast, even San Francisco Bay region and Central Valley, where there are a lot of nurseries, and what are the nurseries supposed to do? So there is definitely conversation around it, with CDFA and UCANR being engaged, and I think they're going to have a different reporting requirement. But for now, just make sure you put this in here, record that you have nursery crops, do your best to report some sort of yield the best you can, and you don't need to worry about the coefficients at this point. Okay, good questions. All right, now this doesn't have anything with you have to do necessarily. This is me telling you what we have been doing, and this is with CVWD, who does your surface and groundwater monitoring. So it's important to know not just about nitrogen that might go into groundwater, but also what's happening with your surface water, as well as nitrogen that they're finding in the groundwater. So with your monitoring, we do surface and groundwater to assess the impact of agricultural drainage and anything in that drainage to surface and groundwater. And our goal is to demonstrate that all of the farming practices implemented across the Coachella Irrigated Lands Coalition is protective of beneficial uses. And when I say beneficial uses, I'm referring to drinking water or human health, right? Human health is a beneficial use. So you have a right to have clean drinking water. So we want to make sure that if that water has a beneficial use of drinking water, we're protective of those standards. Aquatic life is probably the most common one that, especially pesticides, to be protective of, because that limit is lower than maybe even a human health criteria. That includes plants, it includes invertebrates, it includes fish, right? So you've got kind of aquatic life, that's kind of a broad area. Other things also recreation, right? Which if water is ever a place that you could maybe come into contact with recreationally, so the point is that there's all these different beneficial uses and they have different criteria with them. In your order, so as we go through CVWD, collect your samples, it goes to a laboratory, then we look at those concentrations, those results, and we evaluate them against these thresholds in the order, which are, again, protective of beneficial uses. Not all constituents have a threshold, by the way, only a subset does, but if we exceed those, then we need to report it to the regional board. This is your monitoring network, and this is what CVWD has been doing for quite a while now, and you've probably all seen this before. We've got Avenue 56, Johnson Street Drain, Avenue 76, the drain at Lincoln Street, and VSD downstream station. For 2024, we did both quarterly and twice a year sampling. So your pesticides are done twice a year, whereas your other constituents here are done quarterly. We have all the results up through August to October. We haven't processed yet. So that's your last quarter is October. October is your last quarter. But in terms of your pesticides, the number of exceedances is 0. So that's good. That's very, very good. And then the other ones also are all 0, but this gets back to like some of your nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, nitrate, and then conductivity and DO. So again, all looking good, all 0s. That means we don't have to do one of those water quality restoration plans for surface water. The one thing that we did add this year was surface water monitoring for fish. It's been a requirement that we have argued against quite a bit, and we were unsuccessful. That one still amazes me. brought in every scientific argument I could think of, and they still would not budge. So we were required as Coachella to do fish monitoring, and we just did it today, and we did collect fish. So that's why we're a little dirty and dusty right now, because we were handling carp. But anyways, the ideas with the fish tissue monitoring is to get the higher trophic level. We even tried to argue that too. Carp doesn't just eat fish, it also eats plants, so it's not really the highest trophic level. But the idea is bioaccumulation. So there's legacy pesticides, organochlorines, that have been applied, no longer applied, but have been, and the regional board wants to see if they're bioaccumulating in the fish. So stay tuned for next year. We'll let you know. We got some tilapia and some carp. If we had been faster, I would have put a photo up. Okay. So the other thing we monitor for is groundwater. So CVWD also does groundwater trend monitoring. After my I should have said this at the beginning. After my presentation, Wes Yost is going to give a little update on the SNMP, which is your salt and nutrient management plan in the Coachella Valley. Ag is one stakeholder. It's one stakeholder that is part of a broader network. But when we came up with the groundwater trend monitoring network, it was very fortunate we were able to use what they had already done in terms of determining where wells were and getting a lot of information about the well completion logs, and we were able to determine what was suitable for the coalition to monitor. So CVWD does the monitoring for the whole network under the SNMP, the Salt and Nutrient Management Plan, and then we have a subset of those wells, and they pass on that information to us, and then we report on it to the regional board for ILRP compliance. The things we look for, we have our standard field parameters plus some general minerals of cations and anions, and the most important is nitrogen. And we only do the general minerals of the cations and anions every 5 years, whereas the nitrogen's every year. The most recent results from 2024, we did have one exceedance of nitrogen in one of the wells, and that was at, it was in a domestic well at, it doesn't matter, but it's well number 5. If it's a domestic well, we do need to notify the owner of that well, which we did, that it's above the drinking water limit of 10, and they need to let any users of that well know. I think in this case, it's considered a domestic well, but it's not drinking water. They're not using it for drinking water because they know it's high. So just so you know, that's kind of where your monitoring program is at. And what the idea is that we're monitoring annually to look at trends over time. We really need about 7 years to have any idea of trends. I think regional board is aware, and we try to remind them that it takes a long time to understand how groundwater is moving and changes in concentrations. And especially if you're trying to change practices, how does that relate to groundwater? There's a big time differential there. So we are doing our part to monitor, but to try to make those connections, you definitely need a lot more time and a lot more modeling. And then here's what we've sampled. This is our 3rd year of monitoring. So this is kind of where you see, again, I wouldn't call any of this a trend. You can just see where maybe some concentrations look like they're going down, but I would definitely give it 5 to 7 years before we start talking trends at all. Okay, and then I mentioned the water quality restoration plan about why we would need one if we have multiple exceedances. For surface water, if you have more than 3 exceedances in a row, we have to develop one, or a single exceedance for groundwater. So as you just saw, we have groundwater contamination with nitrates, so we're going to be working on a water quality restoration plan. We will tie it into the SNMP since that effort's already happening. Also, ag is not the only contributor of nitrogen to groundwater, right? So even though it might be within an ag surrounded area, groundwater doesn't stay still. It moves around, and it's a broad basin. So we'll be developing that. Regional board is, it's the first time I think any coalition's developing one, so we'll work with them to make sure we're getting the right information in. And again, I think we'll lean on the SNMP efforts, which Wes Yost will talk about in just a minute, to go and to kind of build that in about what practices are being done and how that relates to the nitrogen in the groundwater. This is just our reminder slide coming to an end here that if you don't get your INP and farm plan in by February 1st, you will be assessed a late fee. We will send reminders, but please remember, and the portal is open. And I think those are, yeah, and then just a reminder about invoicing, which you all should be good with. Hopefully have paid your dues, nobody's late, but every year that does come forward in July and then due by September. Couple people. Okay. Well, if you're late, come talk to Alyssa and say, I'm going to send you a check, I promise. But yeah, don't be late on those either, because then you do get assessed a late fee. And so nobody likes to pay more money than they have to. Okay. I think that's my last slide, and we'll take questions here, and then after this, we'll pass it on to West Yost. In the room, does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. Quiet. Barry, online, does anyone have any questions?
There's no more questions.
Oh, everyone wants to go home, huh? All right. All right. Well, we'll let West Yost go from here. I'll put it on mute, so they should be able to unmute themselves. And actually, since I have control of the screen, oh, and here, oh, that contact information we were talking about, I forgot about this. There's a nice little fun QR code to go straight to the portal, phone number, contact at CVILC. That just goes straight to Alyssa, so you can just say, hi, Alyssa. But this is all of our information. You can reach out at any time. Okay, give everybody a minute. All right. Okay. We have.
Hi, thank you.
Oh, good, great. Just
hi.
to move on to your next slides, and I'll navigate for you.
Awesome, thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here today. We're here to request some input from you and just give you some general updates as well on the salt nutrient management plan process for the Coachella Valley. My name is Carolina Sanchez, and I also have Michael Schaefer here with me. And I think Tess is still on the line. All of us are supporting the CVS-NMP process. And today we want to talk to you about crop sensitivity or crop tolerance to salts. So we can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So what is the CVS-NMP? It's the Coachella Valley Salt and Nutrient Management Plan. And at the end of this long-term process, it's by the end of it, it'll be a 5-year process. It will result in a basin-wide plan to manage salts and nutrients in compliance with California's recycled water policy. And the goals of this plan are to manage the salt nutrient loading in the groundwater basin in a way that makes sense for the community. So, based on the different beneficial uses or land uses of the area. To preserve the affordable use of water in the Coachella Valley for all beneficial uses, and to protect groundwater quality for future generations. So we are currently working on what we're calling task 3, and it has to do with defining beneficial uses and the thresholds of the Coachella Valley. And so specifically the thresholds that we're defining are for TDS and nitrate concentration. So again, going back to those salt and nutrients. So what is a beneficial use threshold? It is the TDS or nitrate concentration above which a beneficial use becomes impaired. And they are specific to the beneficial use and can be expressed as a concentration range. So it's not a water quality objective. So if you're familiar with a water quality objective, that is something that a regional water board can establish for what they call groundwater management zones. And it's a specific concentration, not a range, that ensures the reasonable protection of beneficial uses. So today we want to talk about what that beneficial use threshold is, or the range is, for agricultural uses based on the salinity tolerance of the crops grown in the valley. We know there are a lot of specific crops grown. There's a lot of data on that we've collected, and each of these crops is going to have a different tolerance to TDS concentrations, and we're just trying to get a little more information on what that might be, if you have it and if you have input. Next slide. So again, today we want to obtain feedback on these values. We did prepare a forms survey where you can write in some of your input. I want to caution this that there's a lot of slides because there's a lot of crops in the valley. And I'm hoping that these slides can be shared with you all and we can leave the survey or forms open to get additional feedback from all of you, at least through the beginning of next week. I did want to say, so what we're presenting here today is we've already drafted tolerance values, and they're based on several different sources, including the work that was done for CVILC. That is that first item that is listed under the sources for these draft values. And so I just wanted to let you know where some of this information is coming from. I think Michael just posted a link to the survey if you can't access the QR code that we have here on this slide. And then before we get into that, some of the feedback that we're looking for is, based on your knowledge and what you are growing. You don't have to provide feedback on every single crop. It's like, are the values that we're showing here too high or too low? Are certain types of crops, is it okay to assume similar or the same values for these tolerance? And, just, it doesn't have to be exact and numbers. That we're really just trying to get a sense of whether we're on the right track here. I did also want to mention that we are planning to release the official documentation for this at the beginning of December, and you will have an opportunity to submit written feedback if you have that at that time. But we're really trying to get your input along the way and not wait until we're publishing documents. So, but I do want to acknowledge that there is more time if it is needed. And the other thing is that we're having a community workshop to talk about the CVS-NMP process on December 11th. So if you're interested, I know we've been sending out some flyers. So if you haven't gotten information and you are interested in participating, feel free to let me know in the chat and I'll collect your information and add you to our distribution list. So with all that, we're gonna move on to some tables that have crop information, acreage information for each crop, and then the salinity tolerance. And what you'll notice is that the salinity tolerance is divided by yield. So there's an assumption that you can have 100% yield at certain concentrations. And if you go past that concentration, the yield of the specific crop begins to reduce. And so that is what this table is showing in general. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a second to take the slide in. We have about, I don't know how many slides, 6 slides total, and there's usually about 8 to 10 crops in each of the slides. If possible, to get the feedback on the forms today, it's great. But again, hopefully, our plan is to leave it open through the beginning of next week, so you have an opportunity to kind of process the information because it is a lot. So I'll pause for a second. All right, I think we can go on to the next slide. And I'll pause again. as you'll notice here, all of these have the same values. And so here's where type of feedback of it doesn't make sense or it does make sense that these are all the same values for the different crops is also helpful. I think we can go ahead and go to the next slide. I think we can go to the next slide. Here's another great example of a set of crops that are all bundled together. All the citrus crops and mangoes as well are combined and all have the same concentration. If you're wondering what the order of these are, it's based on the concentration and the acreage. So the higher acreage is at the top and the lowest acreage is at the bottom. And these are based on 2021 values. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. There's only 2 more, so we're almost there. Why don't we go to the next slide? Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. This is the last slide. I'll give it a second, but in the meantime, I did put my contact information on the chat. So again, if you're interested in being part of our distribution list, you can either put your contact information in the chat or shoot me an email, and I'm happy to add you. If you want to talk in more detail about the enormous amount of information that I was just given to you right now, I'm so happy to jump on a call with you. So feel free to shoot me an email and I'll send you my number and we can have a conversation. And I think that's all we have. So thank you so much for giving us some time here today.
Great, thank you. I was going to say, Alyssa, we could probably early next week. I don't know if it's too late for you guys at West Yost, but we could just kind of send out a mass email too with the link to the online forms for providing information and those tables from the slides and get that sent out early next week just to all of the membership since not everyone's here today.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right. Give one more chance for questions, just in case someone had a few minutes to now they have a burning question they need an answer to. Barry, anyone online?
Still nothing.
Okay. All right. Well, then we will let everyone go. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you again next year. Thanks, everyone online.